Welcome to Do You Believe? This is a live broadcast, and you know what happens on live broadcasts. Anyway, I have my lovely co-host with me, Donna, and we have a very special guest tonight in the house. I'm so thankful. I'm so happy that you accepted my request.
Oh, sure.
And this is the famous Loyd Auerbach, paranormal professional. Now he's been, if anybody wants to Google Loyd Auerbach, you'll get 50 million pages on him. I did the other day, and there's so much information, I couldn't even get it all in. So he's been on radio, television, in documentaries, and every one of those ghost shows, you will see Loyd Auerbach in them. And especially with the Haunted Hornet. You've done several of those.
I've done a lot with the one,
yes.
yeah. I was the first person to do some work on the one.
Right.
So.
Now, were you on the Ghost Adventure show as well?
Just a real quick thing on Ghost Adventures is just to give them just a tiny bit of background.
Right.
That was Zach.
Yeah, we did just a quick interview outside the
right.
ship, yeah, but I wasn't involved in the actual shoot. I think I probably would have been laughing to her.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions for you tonight.
Okay.
And actually, Loyd, about, what, 15 minutes from me?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay, so I expect to see you some more.
Okay. We can the schedule, we can do that, yeah.
Anyway, Loyd has been involved in so many things. Now, you want to tell them about your online classes that you have?
Sure. Actually, I do distance classes in a couple different ways. One of which is through Atlantic University. There's a course that I teach every semester now called Principles of Parapsychology, which was designed by Doug Richards. So that's actually both a graduate course and a you can take it as a non-graduate, non-student if you want. And then that's truly an online course, but the one that's more interactive with me in some respects are the courses that I teach through HCH Institute here in Lafayette. And those are not really online courses, those are actually MP3-based courses. So they're actually live recordings that we have done of the classes that I teach in Lafayette, since I teach these courses regularly. I'm starting a new session of my Being Psychic class in January. And we've recorded the classes. People who take distance classes can take them at their own pace. They then get to talk to me on the phone for a certain amount of time, because part of the class is for the online distance students, or I should say distance students.
Okay, so are they live classes?
Well, they can call into the live classes, but they get MP3 recordings of the classes. We did a recording of each year, we do a recording of the classes, and that's what goes out to the new students. They get a lot of text materials. They get a disc. They get with all the MP3 recordings. They can listen to them in their car. They can listen to them on their iPods. And they can call. Then we set up a time for me to talk to them, to answer questions, to have discussion. So it's kind of a one-on-one situation, which is very different on the phone than if you try to do this online. I mean, when you do it online, you have a very dispassionate discussion where you can get a lot more done in an hour on the phone than you ever could in hours online with students. So that's kind of a different mode, and it's very low tech actually. So you don't need to have your computer with you. You can do it almost anywhere.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
But do you offer these classes also in person in the classroom?
Yes. So the courses at HCH, which comprise the Parapsychological Studies program, a very deep overview of parapsychology, are offered live. The next one I'm doing starts January 19th. It is a 4-week class on Thursday nights in Lafayette. And that class is called Being Psychic. So it's both about what we've learned in parapsychology about being psychic. It's about how to assess psychics if you're going to go for a reading, and it's about how to be a little psychic yourself. So there's a little bit of psychic development in the course too.
You know, everybody is psychic too.
Everybody is psychic.
They've got intuition.
Right.
They've got, it's just a matter of, as I tell people, opening up your mind and kind of, it's like a muscle.
Yeah,
the
it is.
The bigger it gets.
I got some great advice from a psychic I worked with in my first job in the field, which was at the American Society for Psychical Research, a guy named Alex Tanis, who was a phenomenal psychic. And Alex said that the best way to start becoming psychic is to realize you already are. Just notice that things are happening,
right.
Which is absolutely the case. So the good thing about these classes is I actually have students who take it by phone. So I have a phone in the room too, so I have students, and I had one student in San Mateo who didn't want to buck the traffic, so she just called in every class.
Oh, nice.
Which worked out fine. She actually got all the materials, it all worked out really well that way. So I've had students from out of the area, New York. I had students in Canada who've called in, so the distance, it really works live that way too. Yeah.
And they get a certificate when this is all over with?
They get a
This is an
certificate.
accredited class, isn't it?
Well, the school is state approved, which is different than an accreditation which you would get from a university. This is not an academic class.
So they don't get like,
They get a certificate.
oh, the certificate, but they don't get a degree?
No. You couldn't get a degree with 60 hours work
Well,
for
like an
anybody.
AA?
Not even for that. 60 hours is barely would normally be like 2 classes for any course. So it just wouldn't be enough. And I'd need to lay a lot of academic work on it if that was going to be a degree program.
Now, you have an MS,
I have an MS in parapsychology, right?
and you have a PhD as well?
No, I don't have a PhD, but I am a professor. Yeah.
And let's see, these classes that you teach in Lafayette, you have quite a few subjects that you include in that.
Well, yeah, it's supposed to be really an overview of the field. So there's the class of Being Psychic deals with ESP mainly. There's a class on precognition and psychokinesis, kind of bundling the two together. Even though precognition is still ESP, there's a dovetail into mind over matter with that. Do we read the future or do we create the future?
Well, you wrote a book on that, didn't you?
I sure did.
Yes.
On mind over matter, right. And then there's a ghost hunting class, which is an investigation
Okay,
class.
now, you call it ghost hunting?
Only because of popular, that's what gets people's attention. It's really, technically, I would normally call it spontaneous investigations of psychic phenomena.
Interesting.
Or you can call it case investigations of spontaneous psychic phenomena. So there's a lot of ways. Field investigation is kind of what I'm teaching. And it's kind of a parapsychological model. It's really an overview of what we know from the field of parapsychology for the last 130 years, plus not from ghost hunting TV shows.
So what is parapsychology for people who don't know what that is?
Parapsychology is the study of how consciousness, the mind, connects with the world around it through non-sensory means, what we consider beyond the normal senses, which, by the way, have been expanding. I mean, there are more than just the 5 senses that we know about already. So we deal with how the mind picks up information directly from the environment, from other people, with what we call ESP. We deal with the way the mind directly affects matter and energy, what we call psychokinesis, mind over matter, or mind-matter interaction. And we deal with the idea that mind or consciousness survives the death of the body. That would be called survival of bodily death, which is where the ghost thing fits in.
Okay.
So those 3 areas, it's really about consciousness, about the mind. And it's unlike psychology, which studies behavior, we're studying effects of the mind directly, or how the world affects the mind.
So, when we die, okay, I know we're energy. I mean, we've been having discussions on this, of we're energy and energy that can't die. So what happens to us when we do die?
Well, first of all, energy can be transformed. So even though there's chemical energy inside the head, there's probably one of the biggest debates in science to this day it's a philosophical debate and it's a scientific debate. Is consciousness, the thing that we still talk about as energy, that is us, is that just the brain making us think we think because of all the different neurological things going on? Or is there something either coming from the brain or something that goes into the brain and sticks around and when you die goes out of the brain? So is consciousness the brain alone or is consciousness more than that? Many of us in my field think consciousness is more than that. And the idea of a ghost or an apparition, somebody sticking around after death, that certainly points to consciousness being more than brain, whether it's generated by the brain first or not.
Now, there's been people that have seen really horrible things like a near-death experience, and they've seen horrible. Wait a minute, and they've seen horrible things.
That's really rare.
Is it rare?
Absolutely rare.
Really?
Incredibly rare.
Okay. So why would this person see something horrible, and then this person over here sees a bright light? They see their relatives. What's the deal with that?
Well, first of all, while there have been cross-cultural studies of near-death experiences, and in most Western cultures, including India, people tend to see the light in the tunnel and the whole process. In some parts of the world, such as in people reporting in China and Japan, have not seen a bright light. They've actually suddenly found themselves on one side of a river or stream, and there's a bridge, and on the other side of the bridge might be a relative or someone else. There's a rose garden or some garden on there. So the process of being told to come back is very similar, but there's no tunnel of light. And that's in certain parts of the world, and there are still some questions as to why that is. That's probably a cultural and religious component.
But see, that's the part I don't understand. Okay,
Well,
go ahead.
So the other thing is that when people see those figures, go through the tunnel and see those figures, who the figures are is definitely culturally or religiously connected. So if you're Christian, you're likely to see Saint, Jesus, something like that. If you are Jewish, you're going to probably see your grandmother with a bowl of chicken. That's who I would probably see. If you're Hindu, you would see a Hindu god potentially. And these things have been, this has actually been, in surveys, this has been proven out. It's very likely that people who see really bad things are expecting really bad things.
When they die?
When they die. Because there are people who grow up in religions that are very fire and brimstone. And no matter what they tell people about being good people, we know that people are often hypocritical about that, especially about their beliefs. I've certainly met a lot of people who call what I do demonic, and by their behavior, I'd say they're being living demons, because they're being nasty to people, they're not following what the Bible actually says. So people like that may be afraid of, and may actually run into that. But the thing to know is that this kind of near-death experience, where people have that experience, is only in about 15% of what we would call a near-death situation, where people are impacted. And it's a very, very, very small percentage that have a negative experience to it. Like, I think, can't quote the figure off the top of my head, but I recall it being less than 5%.
Yeah, I've only seen a couple of those interviews.
Yeah.
So what is this near-death experience? How come they're almost dying, but yet they're brought back? What is that?
Well, that's a good question, and it speaks to whether this is really great evidence or just simply evidence of life after death. Because technically, with only a couple of cases on record where the brain activity was practically stopped, people still have active brains. And that means that their psychic abilities could still be operating. In fact, people in near-death experiences often talk about leaving their bodies or traveling around the hospital before they even see the light, or even after they see the light, and can talk about what went on in the operating room next door with accuracy, with absolute accuracy. So what's actually going on is hard to say. We don't really know what's going on. There is some experiments going on, or I should say a study going on, where certain places around the world, certain hospital operating rooms, have cooperatively put flat panel screens which are showing random pictures on them, facing the ceiling and close to the ceiling, to see if people, you don't want to induce a near-death experience like flatliners, because that would be medically unethical.
Right.
But if somebody happens to have one, and they can look down the ceiling from the ceiling on their body, and they happen to see the picture, and they can tell everybody what the picture was at that moment, that's really good evidence that some part of consciousness did displace, go out of the body.
And they've done that. Has that happened?
There have not. This study has just started, and I don't know what the data actually says because it hasn't been reported.
I wonder why it took them so long to figure that one out.
Well, it's an easy one to figure out, and there have been out-of-body studies like this, but the problem is getting hospitals and other places to cooperate.
Just like the police won't cooperate with psychics.
The police do cooperate with psychics.
Not all the time.
Not all the time. And with hospitals, you're talking about, of course, they raise ethical issues. They raise a lot of other issues as well. And doctors, there are many doctors that are very interested in this subject.
Really?
But hospital administrators, probably not so much.
I know a lot of nurses who say that when they're with somebody who is about to die or who has, they say there's this displacement. They see this almost like shimmer of air, and then some have said they've seen lights that have gone up, and they see something shift in the room.
Well, there's a lot of shifts. People have been reporting deathbed apparitions. It's one type of ghost, if you want to call it that, where a deathbed apparition. An apparition
I've never heard that.
Well, this is one of our categories in parapsychology. So the category is someone's on their deathbed, and they see an apparition, typically someone who has come to get them. And there are a number of really interesting observations people in hospices and terminal wards and other places have made. And that is that on some occasions, people who have dementia of some kind, like Alzheimer's, suddenly are perfectly lucid, can talk, and they're having a one-sided conversation with somebody. Will even say, "This is my mother's here to take me," and then they go. And that's when they die. They're actually very happy. It's like somebody came to get them. And then there are situations where people who have been, a couple situations, people apparently come out of comas or come out of anesthetic if they're highly drugged. Again, just right at that moment. And I was talking to two hospice workers coincidentally over the last week who say that very often on their deathbed they'll look at, there's like one point in the room that they're just always looking at. It's different for different people, as if they can see where they're going to go.
Really?
So it's really interesting, but the apparitional piece of this is interesting because on occasion it'll be someone who someone else can see, someone walking through and see two people there, and there's not a second person there. There's just the dying patient.
Okay, so, and this is the course here, the search for life after death?
The search for life after death takes a look at the evidence. That's the course that looks at the evidence for life after death, for survival of bodily death. You know, in reality, it's really life after life. I mean, the fact is that the body dies, but consciousness continues, spirit continues on. So it's really the next life.
So when did they come to this conclusion about that? Because about how your brain continues on.
Your brain doesn't continue.
Your spirit can.
Again, this is.
Those are different wording that you're using.
Yeah, but this is still not. It's certainly not proven. It's what we look at the evidence, and depending on your philosophical bent, that's the thing. Is if you do not believe at all or cannot consider that we are anything more than meat, that we have neurological pathways that make us everything that we are. If that's all you can believe, you can't believe this evidence. There's got to be a different explanation for the evidence. So, and the evidence would be in the witnesses, not in the ghosts, for example. On the other hand, those of us who think that this evidence seems to indicate that something else continues, if there's some part of the human personality that continues beyond death of the body, then the evidence really supports that.
See, the thing is, okay, they say if you're not a very nice person, like a bitch or whatever, in real life, that when you pass on, you're going to kind of like be like that.
Personality doesn't change appreciably, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't.
You really
At least not immediately. Not immediately.
But how can that be?
Not immediately. So we're human beings. So if you are dead but still think you are Noreen, then you're going to behave like Noreen. And it's going to take you a little while to figure out
that you're more than. But how do they know
that?
How do people know that? How do you guys know that?
Well, we only know that from witness testimony and psychics' testimony,
right,
dealing with ghosts, dealing with apparitions. The ones that have not apparently moved on to whatever the other side is or that other transition happens to be. Behavior, the communication process seems to be very, very much like those people when they were alive, which is how you actually identify them very often, by that personality. If you change your personality after you're dead, you're not that person anymore.
Okay.
How are we going to even tell us that you?
Okay, so they're getting this through EVP work,
No,
or
not
how are
EVP.
they getting it?
Through the way that people have been getting it for thousands of years. Direct experience.
Oh, okay.
I think it's the biggest thing I've learned all these years of being in this field, and being around, is that they don't change once they've died. It isn't until they cross over, and they told me this, until they cross over that you become enlightened.
Yeah.
And so here, if you were a jerk, you're a jerk, and so no wonder a lot of times when teams are called into, or I'm called into a place and somebody's being a jerk and they're doing loud things. Well, they were that way in life, so why not be that way in death?
Well, and sometimes I think that from what I've seen on TV and talk to the groups, when they go in and they are rude to the ghosts,
Well, yeah.
then I think that the get out message that so often comes across makes perfect sense.
Yeah, like Zach,
Yeah.
I'm
There's only two, if I was a ghost and somebody came in and started challenging me, I have two reactions. One, I leave, and then they get nothing. Two, I stick around and start yelling at them to get the hell out of my house.
So you've been in this for a very long time. How have you seen the paranormal change? Good, bad, gonna get better, gonna go down some more?
Well, I mean, on the plus side, the interest has exploded. People talk about the explosion of the number of TV shows, and that's an indication of interest, and that is the case to some extent. But if you go back to the popular media of the 70s and the 60s, especially the 70s, during what was called in the publishing world the occult explosion, you couldn't go anywhere to like a supermarket or an airport newsstand and not find books on the paranormal. You couldn't. They were just all over the place. They were selling up like millions of copies. And then there was a shift down, away from that. And then through the early 80s, there were some TV programs, and would occasionally touch on it. You have Unsolved Mysteries starting, things like that. But then you have suddenly cable TV, and you have more channels. When we were kids, how many channels did we have?
Not many.
Young people out there may not know
that. 2 to 7.
That's right.
4, 5, and 7.
And I had more in New York, because I was from the New York area. But you didn't have 500 channels with time to fill. And the reality, who would have thought, if you had said to any of us back in the early 80s before cable hit, that one day there'll be a TV channel that once a year has an entire week of nothing but sharks, what would you have said?
No way.
You're crazy. You're crazy. Shark Week is one of the most popular weeks on Discovery Channel.
Wow.
So,
shark lovers.
they have to fill time with different shows, and there's a limited, and the reason we see so many reruns is because they only have a limited budget to fill that time, so they keep using the same shows over and over again. So what I've seen is, because there's been more for people to see, and people see more people interested, and more people watching, there's been an acknowledgement that it's okay to be interested. I think that's the biggest change, that people are acknowledging their interest publicly where they never did before. On the other hand, the people who are still not acknowledging it are people who have experiences, because they still think, because they're being made fun of on these shows, they're being ignored on the shows, and sometimes being told that they're crazy on the shows. The same shows that are exploring this phenomenon. So that's a big shift that needs to happen still. And unfortunately, the downside is that we see people mimicking TV instead of learning what to actually do,
right,
which is a significant problem. I mean, it's not, I don't watch do-it-yourself TV. I don't like watch a plumbing show and suddenly call myself a plumber. Yeah. But people are watching a single episode of Ghost Hunters and call themselves Ghost Hunters.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Jason and Grant would be very mad if anybody who's an amateur plumber hung up a shingle as a plumber. Because they had to go through an enormous amount of training and apprenticeship and all that stuff to get licensed, and certified as plumbers.
Exactly.
Before they got up the ghost thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I want to touch on some of the
other courses.
Now ESP, Mind Over Matter.
Right. So there are two courses that cover ESP and psychokinesis. One is specifically the course called Being Psychic. And that one covers, as I mentioned, the research that has been done in and around parapsychology on telepathy and clairvoyance, and to some extent precognition, and some associated abilities like psychometry and what we call retrocognition, reading the past.
Okay.
And so it's the laboratory evidence, the evidence coming from people's experiences, and then we take a look at what makes a person more psychic potentially. There are some research findings about that. How that actually works with psychic development, and we have to touch also on what's called psychic self-defense, which is not so much about psychic attack as it is about opening yourself up too wide and having too much information hit you at one time. That's a really dangerous thing, because what that would be like going to a busy restaurant and not being able to focus on the voice of the person across the table from you, but hearing everybody's voice equally, like they're talking to you.
Right.
Too much information.
You mean you pick that up mentally?
That's right.
How can you do that?
Well, that's what telepathy called.
How many people have telepathy?
Everybody has it to some extent.
It does?
A little bit.
They do?
Yeah, sure.
Really?
We have experiences like this all the time, but they're not under control. And unfortunately, if you lower your barriers, just like you could lower your hearing barriers and hear too much at one time, you can pick up too much from people also. So we kind of talk a little bit about that aspect of things. We talk about psychic development, play some psychic games. And then there's one of the most important things, I think, in that course on being psychic is how to assess a psychic in terms of when you get a reading.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And that comes from my research in parapsychology, but that also comes from my magic and mentalism background as well.
And how did that help you?
When I was in grad school at JFK University, when we had the parapsychology program, one of the courses I took was called Creation of Illusion, and it was taught by a local magician. And it was really to give us an entree into the literature and practices of magicians and phony psychics. So how to duplicate psychic abilities, how to duplicate psychic effects. I mean, everything can be duplicated. Special effects have shown us that everything in the world can be duplicated in some way for movies and such. So I was really interested in that. I really was encouraged. As it happens, I was bartending my way through graduate school, and so some magic actually helped me get some extra tips. And I found that I liked it. I used to do stand-up comedy in college a little bit. And
I can't see you doing that.
You can't?
No, I can't.
Yeah, I have to show you a videotape of
Loyd, a comic. I can't.
When I was in the 80s, because I first became a magician, and I tried doing serious magic, I couldn't do it. So I did comedy magic, and I performed in comedy clubs in the Westchester County area when I was living there, and I performed in comedy clubs here in the Contra Costa area as well.
Oh my God.
So I have some video of myself doing some comedy.
Do you have that on YouTube?
No, I haven't put that up on YouTube.
Oh, please put it on YouTube. I want to see it.
I don't know if I really want to. I called myself Crazy Loyd with a K back then. that name came from my fellow magicians in the New York area. When they saw some of the stuff that I was doing, they just said, "You are crazy, Loyd, for doing that stuff."
Would you tell the viewers this little one act that you do?
Well, now, over the years, I went from doing comedy magic. I started focusing on what's called mentalism, or psychic entertainment, which is more the art of, unlike the TV show The Mentalist, it's really the art of simulating psychic abilities, or simulating mental capacity. Because if you're a mentalist, you might be claiming to do something that is a result of neurolinguistic programming or just psychological observation, things like that. So I started calling myself, I perform as Professor Paranormal. That is my title and my disclaimer at the same time. And I do an act called Professor Paranormal Psychic Mind Theater. I also used to do, and occasionally still do, a seance show. It was a fun seance, and called, with a friend of mine, called Seance Fiction Theater.
And how would you do that?
We sit down and have stuff happen at the seance table or in a room, mimicking some of the 19th century mediums, physical and mental mediums. Not so much in the dark, although I have done a dark seance as well. But you do, typically the mediums, most people don't know the mediums in the 19th century, at least the initial ones, did not perform things in the dark. They did stuff in the full light or gaslight, because that's what was used.
What are some of the famous mediums in the old days?
You have Leonora Piper, Gladys Leonard, and Daniel Douglas Hume was another one, or D.D. Home, as people might know him by, in the 19th century.
Were they pretty accurate?
They were physical mediums for the most part. There were two types of mediums. There's the physical mediums where stuff would happen, fly around, move. They might. And
that was for real? They weren't causing that?
They were there, as best we can tell, they were doing it for real. You can fake it pretty easily, especially as soon as you turn down the lights, all bets are off. Mm-hmm. Mental mediums, there were some really great mental mediums. Mrs. Piper actually was a very good medium. Leonora Piper, Gladys Leonard was another good one who actually picked really good information. There were a number of really good mental mediums who did some physical stuff as well. But when you assume the whole dark thing happened because there were people duplicating, people like psychic entertainers duplicating things, and they found that it was much easier to do the effects in low light or the dark, with luminous bands on things, with a helper dressed in black, things like that, because in the 19th century, seances were entertainment as much as anything else. I mean,
so people went to be entertained?
There were two types. There were spiritualists who really believed that. But spiritualism was very, very much a religion back then. It still is. But there were also people who would go as part of their entertainment. They would see a medium perform, or they'd go to a theater and see a medium perform on stage. And the darker it was, the easier it was for the mediums to fool people. Because if it's in the dark, all you need is to, for example, if I'm in the dark with a bunch of ghost hunters, sometimes I'm just really, I don't know, part of me is really just so wanting to take out a water pistol with ice cold water and squirt it in the air. And I've done that on occasion when they were being silly, like when they were being way too serious and didn't really know what they were doing, and ice cold water hitting you from the ceiling, it seems, causes people to scream in the dark because they can't see what's going on.
Yeah. Right.
So it's easy to fool people in the dark, and we fool ourselves in the dark. My entire background in magic and mentalism has not only enabled me to suss out fake psychics, because I've done that a number of times.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Did you call them on it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Really?
But it's also, more than that, it's given me an incredible background in understanding how average people misinterpret ordinary occurrences as paranormal ones, which is essential, not necessarily magic background, but that piece is essential in any investigation. You have to figure out what might be paranormal and what is not. Right. You just can't assume that everything is, even the best case.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So did we touch that yet? Because about how you can find how you can tell a phony psychic when you do a reading?
There's phony psychics, and there's psychics who just maybe having an off day, and there's people, there's a range. It's just not a black and white. There definitely are phonies, there's no question. But you have also people who may think they're psychic because they're very observant, and without realizing it, they've made statements of their observations. Their friends all tell them they must be psychics, and they're so observant that perhaps they're better than some psychics at making judgment calls about people. But they may firmly believe that they're psychic. So there's a sincerity issue too, that there are some people who think that they're psychic because they've been told that all their lives, and they're not psychic, but they're very observant in other ways. Then there are the people who are true phonies who are, you know, and if they're trying to do it for fun or entertainment, there's nothing to expose. I mean, if you go to a theater and see somebody on stage and they're doing a show, you can't, that's entertainment. And, you know, an actor does not start out by saying, I'm playing the part of Hamlet, but I'm not really Hamlet, or I'm not really Mark Twain, he died a long time ago. Nobody does that. It's a show. So you also have psychics who, frankly, have off days, and sometimes they're good at saying that they have an off day, and sometimes they're not so good at saying they have an off day. So when you're judging it, you have to judge the information, not the psychic.
But there are psychics that may not have that great of ability that are out there.
Correct.
For money.
That's correct. Because again, people are paying their money, so they're going to take it.
So,
but there are stockbrokers out there who don't do so well. There are, you know, every profession has got people who are not that good, who often charge more money than the people who are really good.
So I want to ask you about EVPs. Okay, so some people say that when you get your EVP, you really don't know who you're contacting or who that voice is coming from.
Or if it's coming from somebody dead, or is it coming from you?
So an EVP can come from you on a voice recorder, on a
potentially.
digital voice?
That's potentially the case.
Really?
Yeah, because, you know, first of all, we're not dealing with sound. We're dealing with an effect on the device.
But I've had some fabulous EVPs where it was a young, actually the EVP came off of my video recorder. We went over to, we've done many live investigations at the Hornet, and there was a little fella, the sweetest little thing. He had this young little voice. I knew he was young by his voice, and one of my investigators was doing an investigation, I think it was in sick bay, and she said, "Do you miss your mother?" And he said, "Yes, I do." And then she said, "Do I remind you of your mother?" And he said, "Yes, you really do." Now, what is that?
Well, this is the problem we've got. That's most likely not from her. But what it boils down to is, again, a continuum. It's all a continuum. EVP is not, it's evidence of, but it is not proof of anything, because you cannot designate who the actual source is.
Right.
If the ghost appeared and everybody heard the voice, or if everybody heard that voice coming from nowhere, and you could rule out any tricks that were done, that would not even be EVP. That would be voice phenomena, not electronic voice phenomena. Electronic voice phenomena has to be created in the device itself, or in the recording media, otherwise it is not EVP. And that's an important distinction that people really need to make. But the question is, if you left the device there and nobody was around, and you got something on the device, that would be more likely either from an apparition or from the environment, because there have been EVPs recorded of a historical event, not necessarily a conscious event.
Well, a lot of times if you leave a device in a room, you'll hear banging or knocking or walking around. How often do you get the voices?
Right, well that would indicate potentially something that might be interactive. And you have to look at the interactivity. So a conversation is really important. Having a two-way conversation is really important on that. But how much of that may be the person doing the recording, in that the person doing the recording may, without realizing, be acting as a medium for the entity on the, who's trying to communicate. We know that living people can affect digital devices and analog devices. We know that. We have decades of evidence of this. So it may very well be that why certain people, and there are certain people who get EVP all the time, and other people who never get it. Why is that?
Yeah, why is that?
It's probably because the people who always get it are more of a medium. They are themselves, without even realizing it, they're acting as part of the circuit between the ghost and the device.
So is the
whether
ghost
supplying energy or working through them?
Well, that would make sense, because how many times has a group gone in and they've had like 3 recorders going, and only one picks up and none of the others do? I mean,
that would have to be a very directed thing from somebody's mind is affecting that. The question is whose mind is affecting that.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Now, I have heard voices with my own ears.
And so have I.
And the funny thing is, my husband was with us one night when we were on the Hornet because the camera wasn't working, whatever, and so our tech said, can't hear you, so Jim's doing something with it. And there was myself, our cameraman, and my husband, and we were in a sick bay there. And so Jim says, John, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? And the voice down the hall said, yes, I can. And it was none of us. So that was a ghost.
As long as there was nobody else on the ship at the time, yeah.
Well, it was just
how many
the
of you
team.
were on the ship though at the time?
It was just the team.
Yeah, but how do you know that the team
Was the team all present in that room?
Yes, they were all present in that room, and we were down at the other end of the hall.
Because there's always a security guy or two on that ship, and there are guys who live aboard the ship. So
I know the security guy.
I do too. Yeah, so as long as they weren't.
No,
Right.
no, it was, and we all heard it.
Yeah.
Of course,
there's a thing here, and Donna, as somebody who's psychic, you know this, that when you hear a voice, the voice can be a psychic voice, not an actual acoustical voice.
Right.
So the question is, was this a physical sound, or was this, you just were all psychically picking up on the voice? And the only way you'd know that is if you had a recorder going, and you all heard the voice, but the recorder didn't pick it up. And that happens.
And what would that be?
That would be you all being psychic and connecting with that ghost.
No, we didn't have a recorder,
Yeah.
and of course
So,
the video wasn't going.
You don't really know. There are elements of this that there are layers, and you have to, as a researcher, you have to look at all those layers and try to figure out, because we're trying to figure out what's actually going on. If you don't ask all those questions, we can't even approach that. You can make assumptions, but it's hard to make those assumptions.
Okay, we did an investigation at the Star Mansion in Vallejo.
Mm-hmm.
We were the only team ever to do that, because now it's closed down. It's no longer a bed and breakfast. And and I was listening back to the show with my headphones, and the video, because it was videoed. It was a live show. And my team member was using the dowsing rods. 8 times. The dowsing rod gave an indication of a no answer, and we got no on the digital voice recorder, and that happened 8 times.
Okay, well first you know that the dowsing rods have nothing to do necessarily with somebody outside that person holding the dowsing rods.
So it's the person holding the dowsing
The person holding the dowsing rods unconsciously, this is called an idiomotor response. The dowsing rods react to the unconscious mind of that individual. But that individual may be psychic, unconsciously picking up on the entity that's there. It doesn't mean that the information is not accurate or it's not coming from somewhere else, but it is absolutely coming through that person. Again, if you want to see the dowsing rods on a stand and let them move on their own, but as soon as they're in somebody's hand, there's that idiomotor response that we've got.
But then the voice recorder had the exact same response as the dowsing rods.
Which is good, because that actually helps put that together, except, again, if a living person can affect that recorder, it could have been that person's unconscious.
Putting that voice on the
Putting that voice on the recorder.
Really?
Wow.
So, you know, again, where you're looking for corroboration is, if you were there and you saw somebody there talking,
Yeah.
I'd accept that as corroboration more than I would the dowsing rods. Because all of this is based on human experience. You don't have witnesses, you got nothing. So when people go into places that have legends or stories about being haunted, and they go in with technology, but there's no one there to experience anything, it's like going into it's a cold case you're experiencing, you're looking at. You're basing this whole thing on reports that you don't even have first-hand reports of. You need to actually have first-hand testimony, and preferably current first-hand testimony. But dowsing rods, you can use a pendulum. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Wow.
Doesn't mean that your unconscious is not getting the information psychically. It just means that you have to be a little more careful.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed that you do use the term demon. And,
well, I don't really.
Wait a minute. And we've had some other guests, and they will not use the name demon. They refer to them as a parasite or.
I don't use the word demon referring to demons. Demons don't exist.
They don't exist.
Demons do not exist.
Is that a religious concept?
It is totally a religious concept. And actually the word daemon, which it comes from, is wise one. Okay. So that's from the Greek term. You know, this, unfortunately, and again, you have to look at, if you want to go for evil, fallen, something or other, you have to look at different mythologies, because the concept of fallen angels and demons and such is Christian mythology. And you can believe that that's true, depending on your religious background. I grew up Jewish. No demons. Any stories in the Bible were those stories were parables to teach you lessons. You know that there are 2 creation stories? There are 2 stories of Adam. There's Adam and Lilith and Eve, and then there's Adam and Eve. There's 2 stories in Genesis. Not 1, 2.
Wow. I should read the Bible.
So, there are many different stories and interpretations, and of course these things have been translated. And from a scientific perspective, first we cannot study things of God if God exists. We cannot do that. Because God can snap his proverbial fingers and make anything happen.
Okay, so
we don't deal with that. Now the parasite thing, that's a question. I mean, it's a question to look at. But then, there's a secondary question. So are there things that are sucking energy from people and such? Are they intelligent or are they animals? Are they predators like sharks, who I wouldn't call evil, but I would call dangerous?
Yeah.
Or are they just saying, "Ooh, look, there's a nice, good soul. I'm going to make him evil and steal his soul"? I mean, is there intention behind this, or is it something predatory? That's still up in the air. It depends on, again, which direction you're coming at and people's different
Now, have
interpretations.
you been in places that they were saying there were bad things, there were dark things in there?
I have been in places where people had done bad things, and you could feel the emotion imprinted in that area, no question. And that did not mean that there was something conscious there, but it also didn't mean that I wanted to be there.
Right.
So the environment can be toxic, psychically toxic, because of things that occurred at that location. That makes it a bad place.
I was just in a place, it was the Preston Castle.
Mm-hmm.
And we were on, I believe, the 3rd floor, one of the upper floors, and I was called over to figure out what it was behind this person because they felt something was bothering them. And I didn't get it was an intelligent, but I got there was this energy that it kind of, because of so much that had happened there with the boys, and it was horrific, that this energy kind of took a life of its own and was actually moving about. But it wasn't like a person, it was more like this energy that had to do something.
Right.
Energy's got to go somewhere.
Bounce around, yeah.
It was actually kind of acting like it was a living, not a living, but a conscious.
Well, if it is
interesting.
Energy has like cycles and waves, and so that makes some sense to it.
But it was interesting because it had tuned to this person who had many kind of what I call holes, a hard life. Things, holes in them, and so this thing was attracted to that. But it wasn't.
It might be like a magnetic effect.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I'm like, I don't think I've realized this before, of an energy like that, But I'm assuming in a lot of these places, like Preston, like these jails and these prisons, where everybody loves to go to.
Alcatraz is full of that kind of depressing energy.
That people go in and are affected by these energies that are kind of moving about.
And then there are judgments on those energies. I'll give you an example of, the problem is people immediately feel bad, so they think there's something evil. All right, so let me give you an example where you can say it's not the case. I was did an investigation actually for the Learning Channel years ago on the Hornet. It was in the early 2000s. And I had my team, we actually had a lot of folks with us. We took some people who had never been on the Hornet, we walked them around with maps and let them jot down where they thought the ghosts most likely appeared. And these were not psychics, these were people they picked up on the exact same stuff. We were going through an area in the rear of the ship, in the stern of the ship, called the Crow's Nest. It's a gallery area, and they occasionally open it up for meetings and stuff. And there's a couple of big, fairly large compartments. And so there were several compartments back there. We were back there, and I started walking to this one compartment that I just opened up, and I got this incredible wave of like nausea and bad stuff. Okay, so I step back out, I wait a few seconds, and I send somebody else in there. He walks in and says, "What in the world's in there?" It wasn't a psychic. Okay, so we go out. And we, for a couple minutes, and we go back in, and we get the psychic, who is Stash Murray, who is actually the psychic who brought us aboard the ship. She'd been working there before. And I said, "Stash, go in that compartment and tell us what's going on." And she walks in, backs out and says, sorry, and she's laughing. I said, "What's so funny?" She said, "They're having a meeting, they don't want you there." So the energy we picked up on, if Stash was right, was the ghosts, which are apparently talking about us and our TV show. And it was like, "Get out of here!" And they were putting out this energy, but other people would have judge that as an evil, something bad happened here, this was evil. An hour later you walk in this compartment, there's nothing.
Right.
Because it was, but this happens with living people. I mean, we've all been around people who put out bad energy. Or depressing energy, or positive energy, And then there are places you walk into where you can almost tell that there was a fight in this house.
Oh, yeah.
You just feel it. It's the same kind of thing.
You feel that.
People put out that energy.
Yeah. Wow.
So you can't, the thing about researching this from any sort of scientific perspective is you can't make snap judgments about intent right off the bat. I see on TV that, again, you get these EVPs at these places that are being told to get out. Well, the intent is
everywhere.
You guys are asses. That's what the intent is. It's not, they're not evil. You're being rude. You're walking in there, you're challenging them and being rude to them in their place.
Well, what about, like on Ghost, Zach, when he'll tell a ghost, come on, attack me, I'm here, I'm right here, do it, but they don't do it.
What normal person does that?
I don't know.
I mean, if you walked into it was Mo, Larry, or Curly, maybe they might have done it. But I mean, who does that?
But I mean, he's given the ghost the opportunity. Wouldn't the ghost go, "Oh my God, here's my chance. I'm going to do it"?
I mean, personally, I would probably whack him upside the head.
Yeah. Well, why don't they?
I think people are more polite than I am.
I think Zach needs to be scared to death. Serve him right.
Sooner or later, I think some ghosts are going to get together and start, following around some of the TV show guys and start
really.
Boys need to screw.
Yeah. What about that show that they did at the Goldfield Hotel where you didn't see that one?
I don't watch the shows.
Oh, this was before.
Well, this was before they even
okay.
He did this documentary type thing because he was trying to get on TV. Oh my God. I don't know if it's real or not. And the brick threw
the brick thing,
And then he goes flying out the window, right?
I don't know if that's real.
Don't you remember? He's like, I want something to happen.
Well, Nick ran and they couldn't find
It could have been real.
No,
I mean, I've seen things moving, so it could have been real, but I don't know that was real.
But it's the funniest thing. It's like they ask for all this stuff. They ask to be knocked down. And so then when, quote, it happens, they're all freaking out and they're all running away.
Yeah, see, now that's a problem I have with all the shows, that if you're wanting something to happen and you're trying to research this, the last thing you should be doing when something happens is running screaming.
Right.
And that's what they did.
Personally, I mean, no disrespect to the show, to those guys, and my friend Jeff Belanger works on that show. They need a talking dog named Scooby.
So do you see this? I mean, we are saturated, as you said, with shows that are the same. All these handsome, hunky guys running around, and now they're trying to get the young girls to come in, and they've got the kids out there, and they're all doing the same thing, which is yelling, screaming, running, trying to get something to happen, trying to get the ratings. Do you see it as turning into, something positive? Because I really think this is just disgusting.
Only if the network executives stop paying lip service to having something new or different. I've been in numerous meetings and had producers in numerous meetings where the pitch work that is being given, and I'm involved in that in some way, is they're saying, how is your show different? So we explain how the show is different. The next thing I know, they bought another show which is exactly the same. I mean, they're asking, how is it different? We want something new, something fresh. No, what they want is exactly the same thing. So until the networks start doing that, and until, realistically, until the investigators themselves are the producers right off the bat, the problem is, there's two problems with TV, reality TV. One of them is that the subjects of the reality TV typically have no say in what goes on the screen at all.
Right.
They're not in the edit room, they have no input, maybe they do down the line, but they have no input right away. The second is a confidentiality agreement that they sign, a non-disclosure, which very often, and I've seen some that I will not sign. I mean, I've had some for some shows, I've avoided doing certain shows, even episodes of shows, because they won't change it and I won't sign it. And that is, you cannot say anything negative about the show under any circumstance, even if something, even if it's the truth.
Right.
And while one could challenge that in court pretty easily, you'd have to have a lot of money to do that, and a good lawyer and the whole bit, because those, the production companies and the networks have the money, you don't. So, if they fake something, put something on the air, basically, that is completely fake or completely different than what actually happened, or make something up, as the person who's on that show, you cannot legally say that wasn't what happened. You can try in conversation. You certainly can't publicly say that. You can't say, here's what really happened. The producers made all that up. You can't say that. You're legally bound not to do that if that's the agreement. And that creates a really bad TV show.
Right.
Because people who are putting the stuff on are trying to scare the audience, trying to make things, crazier than they actually are. One of my colleagues said that he was actually contacted, and I'm going by him. Barry Taff is a very, very legit, credible person, and he told me he was contacted by the producers before Ghost Hunters came on, the producers of Ghost Hunters, and one of the producers, and I don't know if it's even somebody who's with the show. I mean, it could have been somebody who was just hired to help find people. Said, are you willing to fake stuff? Asked him flat out, are you willing to fake stuff? So
you've got to have something. It's a show. It's entertainment. So
right.
People remember that this is entertainment. And I think, to me, the only way it's going to change is if people quit watching this and say, I'm not going to watch this anymore because if people aren't watching it, they're not making money. So it's up to the people who are watching the show to say, I've had enough, and I want something new, and I want something.
But they also need to they should make their opinions known as well.
Right.
But the problem is that you've got people going out and mimicking exactly what they see on the shows. Mm-hmm. There's a segment of the population. There's a segment of the population that believes that anything they see on TV is real. Mm-hmm. There really are people who think the soap opera characters, or the actors, really are those characters. Right. My uncle was a soap opera director. I know this is the truth. And there are really people who believe that Jason and Grant get in their van and drive across country back and forth for each episode, and that they never fly anywhere, or that that they're invited. They're told to come into these places when in fact it's the production company looking for locations, right. Not the places saying come in here and see us.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, see, but the viewers all buy into that.
Totally buy into that. Yeah.
And the thing is, if I don't know why Ghost Hunters is still on, but if they don't have some excitement or whatever, because it's all done by ratings. If they don't have the ratings, they can't stay on.
Well, no, but there's other ways to do it. One of which is to tell a good ghost story.
Right.
What's that? You want a story that you're actually investigating, not just rumors. The Ghost Hunters is not about ghosts. It's about the ghost hunters. Mm-hmm. Most of these shows are about the investigators. They're not about the phenomena. They're not about the story.
That's true.
But you can, and we've seen this before. You can have a good story, because there are a lot of great ghost stories out there. If you focus on the story and then bring the ghost hunters in to support the story,
yeah, that would be a great one. Yeah.
It's a kind of a win-win. It's what I've been arguing for years. I actually had a pilot with some friends back in the early '90s. We sold it almost. We were this close to signing a contract deal twice for 65 episodes, not just for 13, back in the days of syndication. But unfortunately, because the budgets weren't what they really promised us for travel, you couldn't travel on those budgets, so we couldn't do it. But this is back in '93. So finally, I think the producer Jude Prest, who's still a friend of mine, we're going to release this on DVD just to show that other people before these guys were doing this story.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So, what do you think about all these groups? Oh my God, there's so many ghost hunting groups, and these young kids want to start them up, and they want to go out and help people. What the hell can they help these people with?
Well, I think wanting to have groups is one thing. Wanting to go out and do investigations, I understand the interest in going out to places. There's really an interest for that. But people should not, under any circumstance, be offering to help people when their only training is watching television shows, right, or reading books by other groups, similar groups. They need to actually read, and I'm not talking about the internet. I'm talking about actually reading or taking courses from reputable people. And if it's not me, there's plenty of other folks in the field. There's plenty of other books we can recommend. There's a lot of great stuff. They need to research
also. People are just jumping at the first person. Because then a big swarm of people are coming up. I have a class. You get a certificate. It's 101 ghost hunting. And you come here and you can learn everything you need to know.
People have not taken that course on occasion because I don't certify someone. I only provide a certificate, which is like a diploma. And people want certification. In reality, the certification means absolutely nothing. The only organization that really could certify someone to be an investigator in this area would be the Parapsychological Association. Maybe the Rhine Research Center, the Society for Psychical Research, or an organization like that. But there is no organization otherwise. I can't certify someone legally. I wouldn't want to legally do that, because I'd want them to go through academic training at that point, if that was going to happen. And then you have a responsibility to the clients, which people forget. I get so many calls from people who are so mad because they had the local ghost hunting group in, and they came in, they told the family to leave, which is, they stayed overnight, they came in, the next morning they came back, they were given the evidence review and the whole thing like on TV, it was exactly like on TV, and the conclusion was, here's an EVP, you guys have a ghost, and then they left. Well, the family called them to help. That doesn't help. It's like calling plumbers and saying, you know you have a leak, the plumbers come in and say, yes, you have a leak, and then they leave.
Right.
Not here's how you fix the leak, but yes.
But how can these groups that are just starting up go into something like that? What are they going to do for the family? What could they possibly do for them?
They don't know anything, but again, they're watching the TV shows and they see what the TV shows do and they try to duplicate what goes on the TV shows, forgetting completely that it is just a TV show and it was 40 hours of video cut down to 22 minutes.
But again, it goes down to the responsibility of the homeowner who's having a problem.
Absolutely.
To research who you have coming into your home. You wouldn't have just some Joe Schmo coming up, a plumber thing, looking at your pipe and going, yeah, I think you got a problem. You would research to make sure you had a very reputable person coming in. So why would you allow just anybody, any group of folk coming in with gadgets that light up and make noises to come in and tell you to go away?
In my first book in 1986,
Amazing.
I had a small section on how do you tell if the parapsychologist is legitimate. That was in 1986. I've had it on my website since the late 90s. The questions on there should be asked of me. These are things that should be researched about me. If people are going to call me, I want people to actually know who I am and what my background is. I do not want someone to just assume because they saw me on TV. And I actually will spend time explaining what the difference is. And I think it's really important that people be active consumers and really think about this very carefully because they are inviting someone into their home.
Yes.
And